trace it onto your watercolor paper. And I'm using Arches watercolor paper. And I'm using a size number 8 brush and a little rigger brush and a size 4 round brush. And the colors that I'm using today are Daniel Smith brands, and one of them is Rose Madder Permanent, and the other one is Ultramarine Blue and New Gambage. And this brand is a very high quality professional brand. A little bit goes a long way. I'm using the dollar store plate. I'm not using my full palette. I get all my supplies at Allard's here in Fresno, which I love supporting local businesses. And so let's start. The technique today that you're going to learn is called wet into wet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wet one area with plain clean water, and you're going to learn how to mix color. You're going to learn how to mix greens, how to make beautiful coral colors, and we're going to paint. So the first thing that I'm going to show you is, and we're going to talk a little bit about values too, and we're going to do this in stages. So if you feel overwhelmed, like Brittany said, you can always go back and look at the video, and you know, if you don't understand something, going back and looking at the video will help you. This is how I usually start. I put my brush in water, and I get some water on the plate. And we're going to mix some green. And how I mix the green is I'll take some yellow, and then I'll take some blue. And I always have a paper towel also available, you know, close by. And so you can make a light with more yellow. You can make a light green. With more blue and less yellow, you can make a darker green. So more pigment, less water will make your value darker, a darker green. So you'll have your colors ready to go. And this is what I do. I always have my colors ready to go. So you can just mix, you know, colors on your plate like this and have them ready to go. And you want to have plenty. You don't want to have little dabs here and little dabs there. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your brush, and let's just start. So we're going to add water to this cactus right here, and look at how I'm using the point. I'm just using the point, and I'm kind of just dragging it across with the water. And if you don't have enough water, just get a little bit more. And see how I'm just doing this on the paper? I'm not doing this. I'm not doing all this dabbing stuff. I'm just gently moving the water around in that shape. So this is the first shape, and it has, you can see the glistening, you can see the water there. Now I'm going to take my brush and just dab it and pick up some light green and add it there. I'm picking up some darker green, more pigment, less water will make it darker. And look at how much darker this is right here. See this right here? Look at that. And because there's water there already, it's going to flow and move around where the water is. You can change the variety of colors by dropping in different greens. Look at how I'm using my brush on its side. And I'm just kind of moving it around like this on the edge. Or you can take some color and you can just, you know, drop it in like this. Mix more color. This is the first layer. So we will keep building up on this. Now look at how I'm moving my brush this way to cover a different area. And this is all I'm going to do this one here. I'm just going to let, you can move your paper around to make the colors kind of flow different directions. And just leave it there, because the beauty of watercolors is letting the colors kind of flow and move around. And don't worry about being too perfect, you know, just have fun. So that's the first little image. That's the first shape there of the cactus. We're going to move on to this shape here so that this can dry and not do this one, because if you wet this one, the colors will bleed into this area. So we're going to go here and then we'll probably go here, and then we'll go to this one here. So again, you know, it's important to have your colors ready. As you can see, I used a lot of color when I put it on the cactus shape here. So now I'm going to take my brush again, and just with clean water, and we're going to do this shape. And I'm just dragging my brush around this shape like this. Just like this, just has water, no paint, just water. And I'm going to dab my brush, take off the excess water, and I'm loading my brush with the paint like this. So there's paint on the brush, and I'm just gently just tapping it in like this. And I'm going to take a darker color now, and I'm going to mix more pigment and less water to make it a richer, darker green. I'm going to put it here. Let's add a little bit more there for dark. And let's add some more yellow on this side, just yellow. Let the colors bleed and let them flow into each other. So there, see that? Beautiful. And I'm just leaving it alone. I'm not dabbing it to death. I'm not overdoing it. You know, look at this right here, what's happening here. And what's really cool about this right here is while it's still a little damp, you can drop in other color and it'll just kind of make little blooms, and I'll show you. So I'm taking a little bit more of a darker green here now. And this is what happens if it's still a little damp. You can add paint and it kind of bleeds out like that. See that? This is what's fun about watercolors. If it's still a little damp, you can do these kind of things like that. So add a little bit more here. And a little bit more here on this side. This is really neat. Another thing you can do is you can take a little brush. This is a rigger, and all it has is water. But if you drop just water onto an area where it's still a little wet, you can get these little water bloom effects like that. I'll add one there, here, just to give it like a texture. And if you have salt also, you can drop a little bit of salt in there, and that'll give it a really cool little special effect as well. But I don't do that until the very end, because if you do add salt, you can't paint over the area where it has salt. So now we're going to move on to this little shape here. And I am switching over to a smaller brush because this is more of a smaller shape, and I don't want to flood it with too much water, so I'm just using a smaller brush. But you don't have to have, you know, all these brushes. You can just start out with one brush. A size 8 is what I would recommend, and then maybe a smaller brush like this. So this little shape here has water. And I'm going to take the excess water off, and I'm going to pick up some paint with my brush, and I'm just letting it go in different areas. I'm taking a little bit more yellow to make it look more interesting rather than just one flat green color, because it makes it more interesting to have a variety of colors in there. And you can move your board or your paper around to get to different little areas of the shape, like I just did here. You can move it around. And that's it. I'm letting this just kind of dry. Just like that. Look at that. So now we're going to move on to these two little shapes here, because this is kind of dry now. And then we'll move to this one here, and then these two, and then this one here, okay? So I'm using my smaller brush again, and I'm just gonna add a little bit of water underneath here And let's just do this one here too. And I'm taking the extra excess water off on my paper towel. I'm loading my brush with paint and I'm just dropping it in. This is a smaller brush, and so it's very nice not to have a big brush, because if you do have a big brush, like say like this, you will end up having too much paint and too much water in here, where it will just make puddles of water and blooms. As you can see, this has like a lot of water, and that's why I use a smaller brush to use the smaller shapes. And it's okay if it bleeds out a little bit. You can, you know, kind of soften the paint out a little bit like that. So then we're going to this shape here, because this is kind of dry now, and then we'll go to these two. So on this one, I will use a size number 8 brush. And again, I'm just putting water. Look at how I'm just putting the water in here like this. Just having fun tonight, painting, dabbing the extra water off, loading my brush with the color, and I'm dropping it in just like this, letting it flow, getting a little bit of yellow here, getting a little bit more bluish green here at the bottom. And let's just bring it up. And I'm going to leave that like that because I love that. Just like that, let them all flow. Okay, now I'm switching over to my smaller brush, number 4, just with water. We're going up here and we're doing these little shapes. Let's just do both of them. Just with water. And remember, if I'm going too fast for some of you, you can always go back and look at the video and catch up and look to see what maybe you had trouble with or not understanding. That's what's so cool about having these videos. And I'm going to put a little bit darker green at the bottom here. Now these are the first layers. When they dry, you can add other values of color with a glaze of color, and I'll show you and I'll demo that. And we're not worried about little details yet. We're just going to do all that fun stuff later. But look how beautiful that's already happening, and I love what's happening here. And the pencil marks I'm not worried about, because you can always, when the painting is dry, you can always use a kneaded eraser, and you can always erase the lines, you know, when the painting is dry. If you try to do that when it's wet, it'll smear. So now we have this little shape here. And just with water, taking the extra water off, and I'm just dropping in the color. Just like that, and just change it, you know, add some yellow in there to make it look more interesting rather than just a flat green color like that. Okay, so now we're going to let those dry a little bit, and with this little rigger brush, I'm going to show you, we're definitely going to paint the flowers, but I want to show you how to do some detail on this one here, because this one's dry. And then later you can go back and do details on these right here, but I'll just show you how to do it on this one here. So I'll mix a dark green, and look at all the blue that I'm mixing here. And I'm just going to take a little bit of yellow here. And this little rigger brush, you want to pretend like it's a pen, and you can either hold it close like this so that you can have better control of it, and you can just make little cactus lines here like this. Okay, and then with that dark green, you'll be able to add these little thorny spiky thorns. So these are this is like the last detail that I do on my paintings, but I just wanted to show you now because, you know, this one's dry, but this is going to be the fun part, you know, later at the end when you get to do all the painting, you know, you kind of will work at it. And then to do a glaze, when it's dry, this is what you'll do. So this is the first layer. And to make it more interesting, to add different values in different areas, you can add more color when it's completely dry. And for example, let's pretend like the sun's over here on this side, and so the shadow's going to be on this side, on, you know, on the side of the cactus. And what you could do is you can add a layer of green, like a darker green, and I'll show you now. This is dry here, and so is this right here, but I really like this technique there, this little texture there that I don't want to do too much there. But when it's dry, you can take your color, and this is called wet onto dry. And this is how you could do a little glaze of color. You can just take your brush and do this like this, okay? But you have a hard line now. To get rid of that hard line and to soften it, you want to clean your brush, take the extra water off, and just with the tip, you're going to take that and you're going to soften that edge. You see how you soften the edge there? And so now you have like a little shadow on this side of the cactus shape there. And we can add more shadow to this side over here. Just like that. Take the extra water off. Take the tip of the brush and soften that edge out. You know, soften it out just like that. Kind of like that. And then we're going to do it a little bit right here. So again, take the wash and clean the brush, soften the edge like that. So now you have a little shadow on these sides over here, and I will definitely add a little shadow to this side over here too, because it needs it. Just a little glaze of color. This is why you want to do these things last, the details, because I'm going over some of them. I like that. And let's see, you can deepen more darker green, making a darker green. And I'll just add it here at the bottom. Those hard edges, take your brush, soften them, blend it out, just like that, you blend it out. Okay, take a little bit more of this color now, and oops, let's just use a smaller brush. And you can add a little shadow under this little cactus shape here. Soften the edge. Let's take it and add it to this side over here. And a little bit under there, and we're going to soften these edges. No paint, just softening that little hard edge, just like that. See how it's all, the value is starting to make it look different rather than just a flat wash like it is here. This is a flat wash and it's not interesting, so we want to add another value, and then that makes this shape more interesting, just like that. Already you can see there's two values here, a light and a medium value. And later when this dries, you could add even a darker value under there for the shadow. So you would have three values, light, medium, and darker. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the flowers. And the flowers are going to be in the pinks and yellows and like a coral color. And the nice thing about using these three primary colors is that you can take your blue and pink or rose matter color that I have here and make beautiful combinations. You can see that there's just blue there. And now I'm just going to take some of this rose color here. And you can mix it together and make beautiful purples. You can have your flowers look all purple. Or you can take some of this yellow. Oh, but there's a lot of green there, so I'm just going to use another little dab of yellow over here. This paint is so concentrated that you don't really need a lot. A little bit goes a long way. That's the nice thing about these Daniel Smith colors. And I'm going to take this yellow, and now I'm going to take, and I always clean my brush before I go into another color, because if you don't, you're going to end up, you know, kind of muddying your color there. So this time this brush is clean. And I'm taking some of this color and I'm mixing it over here. And you can see that there's an orange color here. And the more water you use, the less value the color is. Like, for example, look at this color here. You can see this is more like a pinky, peachy, apricot kind of looking color. And if you use more pink, it's going to be more of an orange. Okay. If you use more yellow and just a dab of this color, it's going to look peachy like this over here. But I love just looking at all these colors right here, and you know, I'm thinking of the colors of the flowers. And so for the flowers, I'm going to use a small brush. I'm using the size number 4, and this is how I would approach the flowers. I would again use a little bit of water and think of them as their own little individual shapes. This is what will happen if you paint the whole flower with water, and I'll show you the difference. So this flower here has water all over each of the 4 shapes that I have here. This one up here will only have water on this little shape here. Now I'm taking the excess water and I'm loading my brush with this color, and you can start to drop the color into the water, and notice how the color bleeds into the water where it's wet. The color will go where there is water. This right here, this shape here, the water will, the paint will only go where there's water. These are not wet, so it's not going to bleed into these shapes here because there's only water there. This will all have, you know, the same value here. And now what you can do is you can take your darker color, your darker value, and you can drop it at different little areas here to make it, each petal look different and separate from the others. And notice how I'm just using the tip of my brush to just drop in that color. See how I'm just dropping it in? Just like that. And the problem with this is that it's still wet. The whole shape is wet, so it's going to bleed all over the area. This is why I like working with just one shape at a time, like this one here. And then what I'll do is I'll go to this over here, this flower, and I'll just wet one shape. And I'll drop in, just take the extra water off. And this one here, I'm just going to do with pinks, just to make it look different. And I'm just going to drop in color here at the base like that and let it bleed out so that this petal can look light and then darker here at the bottom. See how much interesting that is? Now this right here, this whole big shape, while it's drying, you can keep adding a little bit more darker pigment here at the base. You can do this. You can change it like that. But see how beautiful that is? And then what I would do is I would come around to this other shape over here. And I'll put water here. Just on that one. And take the light color. And drop it in. Just like that. And then that gives this one time to dry, and then this one over here, and so I would be going back and forth. But I'm going to change some of the petals. I'm going to add just maybe a little bit of water. This one here, and let's just add just yellow maybe, just to this one here, just to make it interesting and change it up. And see how I'm just kind of mushing the color around. I'm not being perfect, you know, I don't want to be too perfect about it. You can always go back in there and add more color. You can also paint what's called wet into dry. And this is painting without having to add water to any shape. And this is how you do it. The technique is just like this. You just add the paint and you can paint the shape like this, just like that. Just adding the paint. There's no water there. I'm just adding the color. Like that. And while it's wet, you can add other colors in there. I like that. And you can add a little bit more over here to this one here, just like that. Okay, now the big flower over here on this side, we're going to use the same brush, and I'm using water again. And since this is a big shape, I'm going to kind of do the same technique as I did with this one here. I'm going to just take the whole flower and I'm just going to put water all over that shape, except for the middle. I'm going to leave it because that will be like light yellow. So it's okay if you go outside the lines. Don't worry about it. It's okay. It's fine. And so there's just water here. Now I'm taking the extra excess water off my brush, and oh, this dried, so I'm going to add water here. And I'm taking this light color and I'm just dropping it in, just like this, at the edge. Just dropping it in. Now I'm going to take just a darker pink, just more pigment. So more pigment will make this value more of a medium value now. And I'm just going to kind of wiggle it around, kind of just wiggle around some of the lines here. Just like that, let it go. And at this point, I would leave this a little bit now alone to let it to dry, and then I'll continue adding more colors in there. This little one here, we're going to go and add some color. And right at the inside, I'm going to add a darker pigment, just like that. See what happens? The color will just bleed. And while this is drying, you can definitely add a little bit more darker in here. Just like that. So this is drying. And these are dry, and if you wanted to, again, while they're drying, you can go back and you can add a glaze of more color. Let's just add a glaze of this yellow here, just to show you how this is dry. And if you wanted to make one area more of a focal area, you can take a little glaze of yellow and just kind of give it a sweep of yellow. Look at that right there. And now I'm taking my brush, I'm cleaning it, and I'm taking the edge and I'm softening out that hard edge, just like that. Just blend it out. So there you have a little bit of a brighter yellow. And you can take your rigger and you can start, well, you know, I think we're going to let that dry first, and then we'll go back in there. Some fun things to do is to add some extra foliage. We'll go back in here and add the little thorns in there after the yellow dries, and we'll go back in here also and add some color. But some fun things to do is adding extra foliage, and if you have a little bit of this extra green here, you can add these kind of things here like this. This is just extra foliage, and then you're going to go and switch over to your number 4 brush, and you're going to be adding some little, what I call little leaves, like little leaves, and just press and lift, press and lift. And look at how I'm turning my brush this way. And press and lift. And let's change the color, maybe make it more yellow on this side. Press and lift. And you turn it. So I'm pressing and lifting, changing the color. Dark enough. And if you wanted to make really big ones, you can take your larger brush and you can make great big leaves like this. So it's kind of fun to change the variety of leaves and little extra foliage that you can add in there. You don't want to add too much because you don't want to take away from the subject matter, which is cactus, you know, desert flowers, maybe just simplicity sometimes, because you still want to add details in here. And you would be taking, now it's starting to dry, and you can take your little rigger brush and you can start making all these fun little shapes inside of it. And if some of the edges are too hard, you can just wet your brush and soften an edge. I'm taking just a dark blue and I'm adding these fun little thorns in here, prickly things, that just a little bit, not a lot, kind of like that. Just kind of like give it a little flick, just kind of like just barely touching the paper, not a lot, just like that. But see all these fun things? And then this is dried a little bit, so let's go back in there and add a little bit more value in there. So now I'm taking my pink and I am using a larger brush, and I'm just going to add just little different shapes in here to make it look like a rose, just like this. See the variety? And if you wanted to, you can just take that brush also and you can soften these little edges just with the point, like this. See how I'm just softening up some of the edges? Just like that. And then what I'll do for the center is I'll just take just the yellow and I'll just add some yellow in there. And then what I'll do is I'll take some deep purple for the center also. And I just made purple by mixing blue and this beautiful rose madder, and then you can just add little dots of purple in there, just like that, for variety. And you can take more pink, more deeper pink, and you could still add shots of color in there to give it more interest. Just more interest. And what I also want to do is add a little bit more of a shade of green here under here for to separate the shape and to separate like the shadow there. So, and then you'll blend it out, just soften that edge. Soften it out like that. Put one under there. This little shadow. Just like that. So see how they're starting to pop, you know, the little shapes? And so then you would do the same for these over here. You know, you could add just little dots. You don't have to add these lines, and you can just mix your dark green and add little shapes here and there, bigger shapes, smaller ones. This is where you want to just kind of relax and enjoy the process. You know, you don't want to hurry it up. You don't want to feel stressed out about doing it. You know, if some of them look too hard, just add a little bit of water and, you know, soften some of those little edges there. And then you could take your rigger, and with that dark green color, you can add, again, little thorns here and there. So you can see how you can just keep building up, you know, the values, and, you know, you'll keep adding little dots here and there. These little guys also can have little dots. And the bottom here, you can just take one of your larger brushes that you have, and you can take all these colors that you have here on your palette and kind of mush them around and mix the colors. I'm going to do more of an, I think, an orangey, reddish earth tone color here, and I'm going to use this pink with some of this yellow, and it's an orangey kind of a color, because then I'm going to drop in some blue underneath there. So look at how I have this color here. It's just like an orange colory color here. And this is how you're going to do the bottom. This is the fun part. So with a brush, you're going to use the side of your brush, and you're just going to kind of make some sweeping motions like this. And you'll just kind of sweep around the bottom like this. So load your brush with the color. It's all loaded. It's all pretty wet and loaded full of color. And this is how I would just do the bottom. And I'm going to take some of that blue and just drop it underneath. This will be the darker value, the contrast. Just like that. And then for fun, this is what I like to also do, is just take that color and just give it a splatter. Just at the bottom. Just kind of just splatter. But do you see what's happening here with these colors? They're kind of just bleeding. Look at the beautiful things that are happening here. And this is what's so fun about watercolors is just what they do, you know, the pigments, what they kind of just do on their own. And then if you have this little rigger brush here, you can pretend like this is your pen, and you can take your brush, and if you wanted to, you could also first practice on a piece of paper your name. You know, you could just take your paper and first practice signing your name. Just pretend like this is a pen, just like that. And then you would sign, you could just sign your painting here at the bottom. Just like that. And so while this is drying, you can keep adding a little bit more of a darker value under there. So I will add a little bit more blue under there because bluish green, dark blue green. So I want to just make this pop a little bit more. So it's almost dry, but I'm just going to add a little bit of color here, and this is what will happen. It'll just keep bleeding out. But see what's happening here? More of a shadow, just like that. And just let it bleed like that. And I might even just throw a little bit more splatter just to tie it in. And giving that shape, just like that. And then you can take more of your green if you wanted to, and you can add it to different areas for more darker shadows. I'm going to add a little bit more green here. And that hard edge, you want to soften it with a clean brush and just blend it out. And see you can see how the values are building up. You know, they just keep building up when you let them dry. So you can keep adding a little bit more of a darker green here. For that shadow, my brush is clean and I'm just blending that edge out just like this. You can go back in and maybe develop some of these flowers too with your color. You can add a little bit more. Keep some of those light values in there. This is what's fun about watercolors is, you know, you can keep building up color, but you always want to start out light. You want to start out light always. Adding a darker value here on this side. And now, while that is wet, the color will bleed because I put water on this side, so it will bleed. But this is fun. You can get yourself lost in painting, and you know, it helps with stress, just helps you get in a different mindset. You know, you're zoning in with your mind, painting and really concentrating. And so this is what's very fun about watercolors. And you know, there are so many different techniques to learn in watercolor. There's different artists and everybody's different, and this is just one way of painting. There's so many different ways of painting, but you can see as it dries and you know, you keep adding a darker color, you can see how the values change. And that's why it's important to start out with a very light value first so that you can keep building up that layer. So I hope that you're able to paint along with me. And if I was going too fast, don't worry, you can go back in there and look at the video again and just try it again. You know, you could take this outline and maybe just paint this part of the cactus, you know, just do this as a painting, or you can do these two and make a cute little painting. That would be really fun and interesting. And so anyway, this is I think as far as I can go with the lesson. I mean, I can just keep painting and painting and building up these values. See, I can keep making darker values over here on this side for the shadows, and see how much richer. I just keep blending soft edges. When you have a hard edge, you can blend it. Another fun thing to do is if you have a little flat brush like this is the size number 8, it's just a flat brush. You can take this edge and you can just wet it. And you can kind of, if you have something that's right outside, you can just scrub it a little bit. And that little edge is gone. You can, this is how you can clean up little edges. Here's one. Hope you can see. Just soften that little edge there. The pencil marks, if you have a kneaded eraser, when it's completely dry, it's dry here, you can just take your kneaded eraser and just erase some of those little pencil lines. But anyway, this is what you can accomplish in less than an hour. Let's see, I will keep adding a little bit more of this pink value, I think, on that flower to make it stand out a little bit more. So let's just add a little bit more pink tones to that.
Yeah, and then Hilda, if anyone has any questions for her as she's finishing up before I pause the recording that anyone would like to ask, you're more than welcome to. I've unmuted everyone.
Yeah,
that, you know,
I'm all ears. See how much, yeah. Go ahead. Do you want me to turn the camera towards me now?
Sure, if you'd like to, or you're welcome to keep painting.
So anyway, I hope that you all did enjoy this lesson and that I did not go too fast, because I have over 20, 30 years experience painting, and so for me it's very easy, but this was the project and you can paint. You can do this. It just takes practice and really have to be relaxed doing this. Don't feel really tight and it will come. It takes time, you know, just look at the video and it's wet into wet technique. What we did today, we did a little bit of dropping in different values in different areas, and you know, you learned how to make little simple foliage with a different brush size. You can make bigger leaves, smaller leaves. Mixing with just 3 colors, you can get a variety of colors. You don't have to have a whole bunch of paint tubes, but later, you know, you can add different tubes of paint to make your painting more interesting. And so I wanted to keep it simple, and because there's so much to learn. The techniques themselves, you know, it takes time to learn. But I hope that you enjoyed the lesson, and I really hope to see you all in person one day again. And thank you for signing up. So if you have any questions, I'm here to answer.
Perfect. Well, if no one has any questions, I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording.